So question, when's the last time we checked the ingredients on our favorite yogurt, ice cream, Oreos? Most people don't, and the food industry is counting on that. Because what's about to be in those products is not what we think it is, and the story of how it got there involves Israel and our tax dollars. Yup, we are quite literally talking goy. Let's get into it. Okay, so first let's talk bioreactors. A bioreactor is basically a giant industrial tank. You put cells or microorganisms in, you feed them nutrients, they grow, they produce something. Think fermentation with beer, yogurt, kombucha, but instead of making alcohol, you're making dairy proteins, meat protein, cocoa butter. No animal, no farm, no rainforest, just a tank. Yum. There are 3 versions of this that you need to know about. The first is cultivated meat. This is where you take a small biopsy of cells from a living animal, no slaughter required. So here you go, vegans. You drop them in a tank and the cells multiply into this mush of muscle tissue that you then press into the shape of a steak or a burger patty, whatever the product's supposed to be. The second is precision fermentation dairy, where you take the specific gene responsible for making milk protein in a cow, insert it into yeast or bacteria, drop that into a tank with water and sugar. The bacteria then multiplies and produces milk protein as a byproduct. Again, no cow, just a tank. And the third is cell cultured cocoa. So this is where they extract real cells from cocoa beans, put them in a bioreactor, and 2 beans end up producing what would normally take 4 tons of cocoa and 10,000 square meters of rainforest. Now the industry will tell you that this is the same thing as the real version. You know, that the cells are real, the proteins are identical, it's just a more efficient process. Well, that's their framing, not mine. Because something grown in a tank is not the same thing as something grown in a field or a farm or a rainforest. The end molecule might be similar, sure, that's debatable, but the process is completely different, and we deserve to decide what we put in our bodies. First, let's talk about the companies we've never heard of that are already in or almost in our food. The top 3 precision fermentation dairy companies in the world right now are Perfect Day, Remilk, and Imagine Dairy. 2 out of the 3 are Israeli. Just keep that in mind. Perfect Day, an American company out of California, it's already on shelves with Brave Robot ice cream, Modern Kitchen cream cheese. Their whey protein is in commercial food products right now. We've probably walked past it without knowing. Remilk, an Israeli company, FDA approved, already launched in Israeli grocery stores in January 2026 and eyeing a US launch this year. Imagine Dairy, also Israeli, also FDA approved. Danone, the company behind Silk and So Delicious, already took a minority stake and they're actively seeking US partnerships right now. All of them go into the same things, you know, all your favorite dairy products, milk, yogurt, ice cream, cream cheese, and they don't even have to replace the whole product. Just 5 to 35%, you know, enough to be there, but not enough for you to notice. Now let's talk about the chocolate, okay? Because this is the one that actually got me mad. Like, this is kind of what started this all for me. There's Celeste Bio. It's another Israeli company making the cell cultured cocoa butter. Mondelez, the company that makes Oreos, Cadbury, Toblerone, Chips Ahoy, has invested in them twice. Already developed nearly a dozen chocolate bars using their fake cocoa butter. They are targeting 2027 for commercial scale, meaning they want to put this in our Oreos on our shelves come year 2027. Ew. And then there's Kokomoto, also Israeli, also the fake cocoa. No consumer product yet. They are still very early, but Cargill just signed a partnership with them in February 2026 to develop the cell-based chocolate. If you don't know Cargill, okay, they are the largest privately held food company in the United States, one of the biggest in the world, actually Tyson's biggest competitor, and McDonald's primary supplier for just about everything, like beef, oil, eggs. Most Americans have never heard of them, but you might have one of their products in your pantry right now. I could do a whole episode on Cargill and the family behind them, okay? But for now, just know this is not a small fish writing a check, okay? This is a huge partnership between the US and Israel. On the meat side, the fake chicken is already here. Upside Foods, backed by the usual suspects, Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, and Good Meat, both got full FDA and USDA approval in 2023 and are already being served in select US restaurants, so watch out for that chicken. But what's interesting about this one is the second it went public, the pushback started. Italy actually banned lab-grown meat outright in December 2023. Production, sale, import, all of it. Their agricultural minister basically stood on business and said, absolutely not, Bill. Hungary then followed suit, and we have Austria, France, Greece, several other European countries moving in the same direction. Then there's Aleph Farms, and this is the main Israeli cultivated beef company, okay? This is the big one, and get this, they are also backed by Cargill. Aleph actually got blocked here at home in the United States. Florida, Texas, and 5 other states banned lab-grown red meat specifically, because remember, we have the chicken here, and we also have fake salmon. But farmers and the cattle industry saw it coming, took the fight went public, and so the beef is out for now. But Aleph Farms was not too happy about this, so bet they're gonna try again. Then there's Believer Meats, another major Israeli fake meat company. They actually collapsed in late 2025. They just ran out of money apparently. I only bring them up because they were backed heavily by Tyson. So I don't know if you're noticing a pattern here, but every Israeli biotech company seems to have a lot of American support. Anyways, the fake meat space, at least in parts of Europe and here in the US, has been very loud and public. People saw it coming and they did push back, which is exactly why I think that the dairy and the cocoa are taking a different route. So they're not coming through the front door, okay? They're coming through the ingredient supply chain as unlabeled components of products we already buy. And most people don't even know that it's happening. What's interesting though is that in Israel, it looks different. For example, Remelt, they chose to label their products transparently. So Israeli consumers know exactly what they're buying. They literally launched it as new milk. Here in the US, the FDA issues what are called no questions letters. So no consumer disclosure required, no labeling required. Same Israeli company, same product, different standards. So I guess we just gotta make sure we're reading that small print on the back of the milk. Other countries actually have biotech food companies too with FDA clearance, for example, Finland and France, but none of them have the American corporate muscle behind them pushing their products into our supply chain. Which raises the question I couldn't stop thinking as I was researching this, as I was prepping this episode. Why Israel? What is so special about Israeli food biotech? But before we get to that, okay, let's talk about why corporations are doing this at all, because what they're gonna tell us, or what they already are telling us, is it's all about sustainability. You know, less land, less water, lower emissions. Spoiler alert, that's not true. Cocoa hit $12,000 per ton in 2024 due to severe crop failure and disease in West Africa. If you don't know, Africa is like the main supplier of cocoa. Like 75% of the world's supply comes from Africa. Mondelez's margins got destroyed and they needed a way out of it. Lab-grown cocoa butter is that way out, because when you're growing it in a tank, you don't care about what the weather did to the harvest in Ghana. Same thing with precision fermentation dairy. When you don't need actual cows or actual farmers, your ingredient costs eventually drop through the floor. And we're not gonna see that savings, okay? Bet the prices remain the same on the shelves. Actually, they'll probably go up. It's the corporations that are gonna pocket the difference. Nothing new. But what I'm saying here is this is not about feeding us better or saving the planet or any other things that they're gonna say. It's about cutting their dependence on farmers and supply chains and natural systems they currently have to negotiate with. They want total control of what goes in the product, and they want to stop writing checks to people they'd rather not need. Essentially, they are greedy and they hate us, that's it. But okay, back to the question, okay? Why Israel? Well, the Netherlands actually produced the world's first lab-grown burger in 2013, years before any Israeli company had a commercial product. And like I said before, Finland and France have companies with the same FDA clearance as Israeli companies right now. So why is it Israeli biotech specifically that American corporations showed up for? And why is Israeli technology moving into American supply chains? Well, I'm sure you can guess it's because they are our greatest ally. I mean, that's essentially the reason for everything, right? But here's what that actually means in practice. The US has given Israel over $300 billion in cumulative foreign aid since 1948. I mean, that's what's documented, right? If I want to keep this legit, fact-checked, yeah. But regardless, okay, more than any other country in American foreign aid history. And for decades, that actually included direct cash transfers, like no earmarks, no strings, just money. And Israel used that stability to build one of the most government-subsidized food tech ecosystems in the world. So when the Israeli Innovation Authority, which is basically Israel's government venture capital arm, funds food tech startups or puts $18 million directly into a lab-grown meat consortium, that's possible in part because American taxpayer money has been subsidizing the Israeli government budget. But it gets more direct than that, okay? BARD. BARD is our joint agricultural research fund with Israel, run through the USDA with our tax dollars. They have put $310 million into Israeli agricultural research since 1979. Fun fact, it was built during the Cold War, the economic layer on top of the military relationship already established by Johnson and Nixon. But now it explicitly covers alternative proteins. In 2025, BARD funded 27 US-Israel research projects with alternative proteins as the stated priority. One of them with Aleph Farms and Tufts University, our tax dollars. So despite the Netherlands having the science first, no American government money because the Netherlands doesn't have what we have with Israel. But it doesn't end there. 4 months ago, January 2026, the US and Israel signed a new strategic technology framework, essentially a broad tech innovation partnership with biotechnology now explicitly named. It was signed in Jerusalem with Mike Huckabee in attendance and American tech corporation execs in the room. They're expanding it with our money. So when you ask why Israeli food biotech is the one ending up in our supply chain, the answer isn't innovation. It's not because Israeli biotech is better. It's that a financial and military relationship created the conditions that made it inevitable. So when food biotech emerged in Israel decades later, American money just naturally flowed there too. Our tax dollars made that possible. Our tax dollars built the ecosystem that produced Remilk, Imagine Dairy, Celeste, Bio, and Kokomoto. And now, these products are heading into our food supply without our knowledge or consent. Well, I could have wrapped the show up here. Okay, I could have packed it up, but your girl had to dig deeper because I wanted to know who actually built the Israeli side of this ecosystem. Because money flowing into it is one thing, but someone had to build the infrastructure that turned that money into the specific products now headed into our supply chain. And I had a feeling there was more to it. Call it an inkling. Call it feminine intuition. Well, when you pull on this thread, you find a system and two companies that show you exactly how it was built and who paid for it. The first is Tenuva. Tenuva was founded in 1926, 22 years before Israel existed as a state, not started by one person, but built collectively by Jewish farmers and backed by the Histadrut. The Histadrut is essentially a Jewish labor federation that functioned like a shadow government. The ideology behind it was labor Zionism, the belief that Jewish people needed to build an entirely new society from the ground up, and farming wasn't incidental to that, it was central to it. Economic dimension was explicit from day one. Create a self-sufficient Jewish food economy in mandatory Palestine, buy Jewish produce only, and hire Jewish labor only. The only problem was that Palestinian farmers were already there, and they already had their own dairy produce businesses. Which, I mean, kind of makes sense considering the fact that it was mandatory Palestine at the time. Well, Tenuva's founders went door to door telling Jewish families to buy Tenuva dairy specifically to support Zionism. The exclusion of Arab farmers and Arab produce from Jewish consumption wasn't a side effect, it was the stated goal. Tenuva was the agricultural infrastructure of that campaign from the beginning. And then there's Strauss. Strauss is a private family dairy built by German Jewish immigrants in the 1930s. They made gourmet cheese, positioned themselves as the upmarket option to Tenuva, deliberately differentiated so they weren't threatening Tenuva directly. The internet will tell you that they're competitors, that they were competitors then and they are competitors now. And sure, but they always shared the same goal, which was a Jewish-owned food system. Different lanes, same destination. Well, in 1959, they were struggling financially, so they walked into a government office and walked out with a loan. The man who gave it to them was Pinchas Sapir, Israel's Minister of Industry and Trade, called the father of the Israeli economy. And you know what? I might be saying his name wrong. I just might. And to be honest, I don't really give a shit. But if it bothers you, maybe you should just unsubscribe. I'm just putting that out there. But anyways, he ran the entire economy out of a personal black notebook, no transparent process, no open applications, just one man deciding who got money, who got monopolies, and who got tax concessions. He was explicitly building a Jewish private ownership class. That is documented. What is not documented is how the Strauss family got in that room, how they had the pull and the plug to get a loan that helped build Israel's dominant private dairy company. I don't know about you, but I think that's a very strange thing to not have a paper trail on. As someone who's been, doing research for a bit for these videos, I think that's weird, and I love some good documentation. And your girl dug deep. Okay, let me just toot my own horn really fast, toot-a-la-toot. I spent days researching this video, days. So could you please be so kind and just give this video a like? Let's actually pause right now, go like this video. Please, just help a girl out. Okay. Anyways, here's what the map looked like, okay? Tenuva controlled the mass market, so think bulk dairy, collective infrastructure feeds the country. Strauss covered the upmarket lane. Think gourmet cheese, private family company, government backed. And then, in the 1950s, the Israeli government installed a quota system. It capped milk production farm by farm, blocked foreign competition with 40% tariffs, and shut the market down. Palestinian farmers were excluded from this quota system entirely, or when they finally were included in 2012, they were handed 0.02% of it. Meaning, out of every drop of milk legally produced in Israel, Palestinian farmers were allowed to produce essentially none of it, or, sorry, 0.02% of it. My bad. And if that quota system sounds too bureaucratic to feel real, here's what it looked like on the ground. Black goats were the primary livestock of Palestinian Bedouin communities, their main source of milk, their food supply, the foundation of their dairy businesses. In the 1970s, Ariel Sharon, at the time the Minister of Agriculture, later the Prime Minister, and one of the most powerful and controversial figures in Israeli history, kind of because he was so evil. I mean, this guy was not it. He created a paramilitary unit called the Green Patrol, whose explicit job, this was their job, to go out and seize and slaughter the black goats. And in 3 years, they cut the herds by 60%. 3 Jewish companies ended up controlling 85 to 92% of the dairy market in Israel. You know, what was then mandatory Palestine, but now the state of Israel. 2 of those being Tenuva and Strauss, the 3rd being Tara. It's another cooperative of Jewish dairy farmers, but all Jewish owned, all operating under government protection, and their competitors, you know, the Palestinian farmers, their little old dairy businesses with their black goats, they weren't outcompeted. They were removed from the game before it even started. Then Strauss came to America. In 2005, they acquired Sabra Hummus in New York for $9 million. They build the world's largest hummus plant in Richmond, Virginia, and Sabra becomes the #1 hummus brand in America. Then 3 years later, they sign a 50-50 joint venture with PepsiCo. Oh, and by the way, they also supplied dairy to the IDF. Yeah, on their website, they supported the Golani Brigade, one of Israel's most active combat units deployed repeatedly to Gaza. But whatever, no big deal, who cares? Who cares? Out of sight, out of mind. Right? Then in 2011, this is where we circle back to the, the biotech, the Israeli Innovation Authority selects Strauss to run a government-funded food tech incubator. And this is a program designed to help early stage startups transform food and agricultural innovation into viable businesses. 4 years later, the Kitchen Food Tech Hub opens. This is big, okay? Strauss owns it, the Israeli government co-funds it. And by Israeli government money, I mean in part ours. Making sure you're tracking. Anyways, this isn't just one incubator among many, okay? This is Israel's only government-designed food tech incubator, and the companies that came out of it are the ones that we were just talking about. Aleph Farms, Imagine Dairy, and Kokomoto. Anyways, Tenuva runs the exact same play. Their Fresh Start incubator is backed by the Israeli Innovation Authority and a New Jersey-based food tech fund, so even more American investment. Tenuva holds 60% of Israel's alternative protein market, and they're now invested in, drumroll please, Remilk. Why am I telling you all this? Because Israel didn't end up in our supply chain by accident. Okay, 2 companies with 70 years of government-backed advantage behind them ended up as the gatekeepers to the entire ecosystem that American corporate money flowed into. This is not conspiracy, okay? This is just what 70 years of compounding advantage looks like, built on a system that was designed from the very beginning to exclude one group of people and elevate another. And then there's the thing that nobody is leading with. This is just the cherry on top. Okay, our health. These products are new. They have never existed in the human diet before and have 0 long-term consumption data behind them. The FDA can tell you something appears safe to eat today. It cannot tell you what happens when an entire population eats it as a dietary staple for 20 or 30 years, because the data doesn't exist yet. In 2023, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the World Health Organization identified 53 potential health hazards associated with cultivated meat. Among them, the growth factors used to trigger rapid cell proliferation in bioreactors have been linked to cancer development. No big deal. And get this, most of the safety research that exists was paid for by the same companies that need this to succeed. So independent long-term studies essentially just don't exist. We are in a very literal sense the trial. Plus they want to kill us, allegedly. Plus Bill Gates gets off on it, allegedly. So let's put this all together. A financial and military relationship between the US and Israel created a pipeline. Our tax dollars built it, through BARD, through $300 billion in cumulative aid, through a signing ceremony in Jerusalem 4 months ago that most Americans never heard about. That pipeline flowed into an ecosystem built by 2 Israeli companies that spent 70 years accumulating government-backed advantages in a market the Palestinians were removed from before the game even started. And that ecosystem produced the precision fermented dairy, the cell-cultured cocoa, now headed into our food supply. And on top of that, it's not gonna be announced. It's not gonna be no press release. Nobody is changing the packaging. The Oreos are gonna look exactly the same. The only difference is what's in it. And unless we're reading the back of the pack, the back of every single package, we're just not gonna know. But in Israel, they label it. The Israeli consumers know exactly what they're buying. We don't get that same courtesy. Same company, same product, different standard, because I guess the people making these decisions have calculated that we either won't notice or we won't care enough to push back. It would be so cool if I could end it right here. Thank you so much for watching. Seriously, thank you if you made it this far. Again, give a girl a like. Help a girl out. Help a girl out. Comment down below, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, y'all.